In the 1960s, archaeologists studying ancient skeletal remains kept noticing something strange. Healthy teeth, missing in the exact same pattern over and over across completely unrelated ancient populations. It wasn't decay. It wasn't injury. It was deliberate. The pattern was too consistent to be an accident. In skeleton after skeleton, the same specific teeth were gone, usually the upper front incisors, removed cleanly, with no sign of the abscesses, cavities, or trauma that would explain natural tooth loss. The surrounding bone had healed smoothly around the empty socket, meaning the person had survived the extraction by years, sometimes decades. Whatever had happened, it hadn't been an emergency. It had been intentional, and it had been done to a living, healthy young person on purpose. Archaeologists call this ritual dental ablation, and once researchers started specifically looking for it, they found it almost everywhere. Ancient populations across sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and parts of the Americas all show independent evidence of the same basic practice, knocking out or filing down specific teeth, usually during adolescence, in ceremonies tied to the transition into adulthood. These weren't cultures that had contact with each other. In many cases, they were separated by oceans and thousands of years. And yet the underlying behavior, deliberately altering the mouth as a marker of life transition, kept appearing independently again and again. The earliest confirmed evidence pushes back remarkably far. Skeletal remains from sites in China dating to around 6,000 years ago show clear signs of intentional tooth removal in young adults, consistent enough in pattern that researchers believe it was tied to a formal, recognized custom rather than isolated incidents. Similar evidence turns up in ancient Japan, where archaeologists studying Jomon period skeletons, some over 3,000 years old, found that specific teeth, usually the canines, had been deliberately extracted in a majority of adult remains examined, following age and pattern trends that suggest the practice marked a specific life stage, most likely the passage from childhood into adulthood, or in some interpretations, marriage. So why would an entire culture agree, generation after generation, that removing a healthy tooth was worth doing? The most consistent answer researchers have arrived at is that it wasn't really about the tooth at all. It was about what surviving the removal proved. In many documented societies that practiced dental ablation into more recent history, close enough to be directly recorded by anthropologists rather than only inferred from bones, the extraction was performed publicly, often in front of the community, and often without any effective way to numb the pain. The ability to endure it without flinching, without crying out, without breaking composure, was the entire point. It functioned the same way scarification, branding, or other forms of ritual pain have functioned across countless unrelated cultures throughout history, as undeniable, permanent, visible proof that a person had faced something difficult and come out the other side. A missing tooth couldn't be faked, couldn't be hidden, and couldn't be taken back. Once it was gone, everyone who looked at that person smile for the rest of their life would know exactly what they had endured. There's a second explanation that shows up alongside the first, particularly in cultures where the practice tracked closely with the exact age of puberty. In numerous documented ethnographic accounts, the removal marked the specific, unmistakable line between childhood and adulthood. Before the ritual, a person was a child, still under the protection and authority of their elders. After it, healed and marked, they were recognized as capable of the responsibilities and the risks of being an adult member of the group. In several African cultures where this tradition persisted into the 20th century and was directly documented by researchers, community elders described the removal explicitly in these terms. A person without the marking wasn't yet considered a full adult, regardless of their actual age. The tooth wasn't decoration. It was a formal, biological signature stating that this specific transition had been completed and witnessed. There's also strong evidence the practice served as a form of group identification, functioning almost like a permanent uniform written directly onto the body. Because dental ablation patterns often varied slightly between neighboring groups, which specific teeth were removed, in what pattern, at what age, anthropologists studying regions with several distinct ethnic populations living in close proximity have found that the exact style of dental modification could reliably identify which specific group a skeleton belonged to, even when other cultural markers had long since decayed away. In a world without photographs, written records, or passports, your own teeth were doing the work of an ID card, permanently and visibly, every single time you opened your mouth to speak or smile. This is where the archaeology gets genuinely useful beyond just curiosity. Because dental ablation leaves such a clear, permanent signature on bone, and because the exact exact style of modification tends to be culturally specific and remarkably stable over generations. Researchers have been able to use it to track ancient population movements and group boundaries in places where no other evidence survives. When archaeologists find two burial sites a significant distance apart with matching, highly specific dental modification patterns, unlikely to occur by pure coincidence, it becomes strong physical evidence of shared cultural origin, migration, or sustained contact between groups separated by both distance and time. The teeth are, in a very real sense, still telling researchers exactly who these people considered themselves to be, long after every other trace of their spoken language, their beliefs, and their names has disappeared entirely. But there's a detail in the archaeological record that complicates the tidy explanation of pure willing tradition, and it's the detail that should make you look at this practice differently. Not every case shows the smooth, fully healed extraction site associated with a well-supported, community-sanctioned procedure. In some skeletal remains, researchers have documented signs consistent with infection, poor healing, or complications, evidence that not every extraction went as intended, and not every person who underwent it did so without real, unmanaged suffering. Anthropologists studying these traditions in living cultures also recorded significant social pressure attached to the ritual. In several documented societies, refusing the procedure carried consequences ranging from social exclusion to being permanently barred from marriage eligibility. The line between a chosen rite of passage and a coerced one, enforced by community expectation rather than personal desire, is a line that almost certainly varied enormously by culture, by individual family, and likely by the specific person undergoing it, in ways the archaeological record alone can never fully recover. Which means what looks, from a distance of thousands of years, like a single unified practice, was almost certainly an enormous range of individual human experiences. For some, it may genuinely have been a proud, willingly chosen marker of belonging and endurance, performed among people who loved and supported them. For others, it may have been something closer to an obligation they had little real ability to refuse, carried out under the weight of a community that had already decided, long before that specific person was born, exactly what an acceptable adult was supposed to look like. Modern humans tend to look at practices like this from the outside and reach immediately for the word barbaric, assuming distance in time automatically implies distance in meaning. But the underlying impulse, permanently marking the body to prove that a difficult threshold has been crossed, has never actually gone away. It shows up today in tattoos commemorating survival, in scars people choose not to have removed, in the specific, visible signs modern humans still voluntarily carry to prove, to themselves and to everyone who looks closely enough, exactly what they have already lived through. The teeth those ancient humans left behind in the ground were never really about teeth. They were a message, deliberately built to outlast the person who sent it, still readable, still legible, still telling researchers something true about a moment in a stranger's life, tens of thousands of years after that stranger's name, and everyone who ever knew it, disappeared completely.